Aloha. In our greatest news stories for today, we have both ex OpenAI alum making a big splash in the VC and the startup area. Both Suskaver and Murati have their startups coming out. We've got some information coming in from the science side of things with MIT and all of the other beautiful and exciting stories from everybody else around the world. Welcome to the Daily AI Show. I am joined by Beth, Andy, Carl, and Brian. And today is Wednesday, and that means it's News Day. All right, so who would like to open up with an exciting story or a story that caught their attention? Brian, you got something?
Nobody is shocked about, Jimmy, and that is the Humane Pin has shut down, and they are selling their remaining assets, not for $1 billion, actually a shockingly high number of $115 million to HP. So the co-founder as well as some of their staff are going to be moving over and starting up a new little area of HP to help their OS system that they created integrate with HP printers and other stuff that HP has some ideas for. This is basically a fire sale at this point. I don't think anybody is shocked to see the Humane Pin not make it after Marquise Brownlee called it the worst review he ever did last year. And they've been circling the drain ever since, with their returns far outpacing their sales for months, despite slashing their cost by half or their price by half. And also trying to pivot and talk about it being an operating system versus an actual physical pin, but they couldn't outrun their own disastrous start as far as I'm concerned. So I think this is like the shocking news that nobody is actually shocked. At least we're not shocked about. Actually, I'm shocked they got as much money as they did from HP more than anything, that it wasn't a $10 million and not $100+ million sale. So just wanted to throw that one out there. We've been tracking Humane for a while. This is what happens though, right? There's nothing wrong technology, but it just didn't ultimately do what they promised it could do. It left a lot of people disappointed, and I think you literally have now 9 days for that operating system or any cloud connectivity to work, and then your Humane Pin is basically just a draining battery and is, I don't think, any real value to past that. So that's my first news story to jump in with.
Yeah, I was actually along with you. I was really surprised about well, number one, that anybody wanted to pick up the tab or pick up the assets. I didn't find anything that was like what specific assets HP was really interested in. But I think that's where the deeper dive might be for people is, so what is HP actually getting for their $115 or $116 million?
Well, I think it's an acqui-hire. $116 million won't cover even a fraction of the investors' investments. So it's really not something that it will provide any return to the original founders or the team. It's just like almost reorganization funds, that sort of thing. But the founders, we know, have demonstrated some significant capabilities, and in the context of a very large enterprise HP, they've been hired to come in and integrate. It's kind of become the foundation of HP's AI play.
And by the way, they got 300 patents or patent applications along with that. We all know, I mean, who knows what's in those patents or how detailed they are. One of those patents could end up being worth $116 million, right? So from HE's side of things, it's probably, and to your point, Andy, it's acqui-hire. They're getting technical staff, technical know-how. If HP didn't have this or hadn't been building this, plus all those 300 patents, which could be, who knows? I don't know. I mean, I think of HP and my printer sitting up on my desk up here, and HP obviously makes computers and stuff, but I tend to think of them as printers. They're obviously a much larger company than that. But it makes sense. I think it makes sense to do it. And who knows? Maybe there is some real gold in those patents that Humane had started out with, and that could be super helpful to HP. Time will tell, right? But they got it for, the valuation that they were saying that they thought they were worth was like over $1 billion. So if you compare it to that, it's a steal, but I guess it depends on what they get out of it at HP.
Yeah, I hope they can do something with the OS. There was a lot of time and effort spent into that. Now, the combination of their hardware options, it didn't quite sync up, but there might be still a nugget there. All right, who's got another story that they're chomping at the bit to talk about? Otherwise, you're just going to hear me rattle off stories left and right.
I have tons, but
No?
go for it.
Okay. All right. Well, let's dive into two of the ones I mentioned. Mira Murati, former OpenAI CTO, has announced her new startup, right? So exciting news. And anyone who's come out of OpenAI when they've started stuff, even back in the day, with some of the other larger AI companies, everyone pays attention. So she came out with a company called Thinking Machines Lab, which they're trying to build tooling to make AI work for people's unique needs and goals, and to create AI systems that are more widely understood, customizable, and generally capable than those currently available, end quote. So beyond that, I don't know if that says much of what the startup is doing other than, hey, we're making AI and we're applying it to use cases and things like that. I have a feeling it's probably a little more, the company's going to be a little more focused on the client side of things or customer facing, and might be a little more focused or specialized in their execution, much like
Beth,
how we talked about Perplexity.
Before you move on from that one, Jimmy, Beth, can you bring up the screen, please? So this is the website, Jimmy, and I think to your point, like, what are they? There it goes. Number one, like, not quite sure the aesthetic here. I mean, it literally has that sort of typewriter feel to it for a brand new company.
Right.
I don't really get this. I think it's like people, this is my impression. People who work there think this is cool. And somebody who's from my side looking at this going, well, we've all been waiting to see what she's going to do, as well as quite a few. I mean, look, if you go down here, this is the current team. And if you click through, there's no lack of knowledge and industry expertise on this team, including Mira, right? But she's not the only one. Clearly, there's plenty of people here, and this is just an alphabetical order. So my point to saying this, though, Jimmy, is like, outside of what they're doing, which we could talk about, I don't quite understand if this is a cool factor. Maybe I'm the wrong age, maybe whatever. But when I look at this, I'm going, dude, you're an AI company. Show me something with AI that with your website that is going to get me excited about what you're doing. Because like, I don't quite get this. But if you look down here, this will tell you a little bit more, I think, Jimmy, about what they're all ultimately trying to hire for, because you can see it in the come join our team part of it.
I would say, we're not the audience of this, and
you don't think so?
No.
Who thinks it's cool then? Who's the audience?
Yeah, no. The audience is. I think the audience is really nerdy people, because this is completely a throwback, like you said, to that typewriter format. Yeah. This is a throwback to that readout style, old tech, when it's introducing things like that. It's definitely not for all of the flash and the hype that's surrounding AI and generative AI and stuff like that. Thinking machines. This is that actually calls back to old references and things like this. This is super deep cut in the computer science kind of world. So yeah, absolutely, it's definitely not appealing to the larger masses. I think so. And right which here, could, I don't know, maybe it might be an issue for them.
So Witty is saying it's showing confidence in its simplicity, which again would probably not be us as the audience, but there are other contexts in which maybe this is a really effective way of communicating.
But wait a second, if it's for a nerdy audience, isn't it for us? Are we disclaiming our nerdy status at this point?
I hear you, Woody.
I
Woody
can
knows
appreciate
in our
it.
thing that it's showing confidence and simplicity. I disagree. Like, I get what you're saying. Like, look at us. We could put a one pager out there, and it's only got 15 words on it. I'm overemphasizing. I'm being dramatic.
Yeah.
I know, but
Also, glass
like,
houses. Don't throw stones. We have a one pager out there too.
okay, Beth, not
Very
because
true.
we don't want to do better, not because we think we're super cool. We just literally haven't had the time and space to go build something better.
But maybe
for us.
that's the
This
case,
is
right? They haven't
perfect.
had the time to build that. Like, it's like, put something out.
Well,
Okay, let's do that.
Okay, well, if apparently they put out a blog post and they do go into a little more detail about they want to focus on the scientific community and programming and stuff like that, and that's what they're they want to build their models for.
Yeah. So
and whatnot. That is straightforward.
Yeah, this website is not the focus of this week's news, so I submit that we should move on. But I will say about Mira Murati, she's a CTO, Chief Technology Officer.
Yeah.
She's not a Chief Marketing Officer, and she didn't spend any moments at night thinking about what does my website look like.
True.
That's a shame. Let's move on.
Okay. Moving right along. I'll jump in with what I'd like to talk about today. I really only have one major contribution that I think won't be duplicated by others, unless actually, Junmi, you're going to hit on this one too. But there is a new technology in quantum computing that has hit the news this week, and it's a company that's advancing what are called neutral atom quantum computers. Now, neutral atoms just means atoms that are stable and can remain in a state until they're affected. They don't automatically change their state, which is an important part of becoming a qubit in the context of quantum computing. And the main advantage of this is that, if you recall, we talked about quantum computers and like the Willow system, and it's a massive refrigeration system, like to keep either the trapped ions or tiny superconducting circuits cold enough to work. So it takes a huge room full to just assemble 100 qubits. Well, neutral atoms, this achieves quantum states without the need for these bulky cooling systems. And that makes them a platform for excellent qubits that can scale to a much larger number of qubits interoperating. And that is a key to getting there. So they raised $230 million in funding, and they are a spin-out from Harvard and MIT. So teams at both Harvard and MIT collaborated, and then they spun out to become this company. In this method, they trap an array of rubidium atoms using laser light, and that's what stores the quantum information in the energy levels of the atom's electrons. And so this is a major advance. And I think, compared to the trapped ion or superconducting circuits approaches that Google and IBM are advancing and leading, this one has a lot of promise to it. But they're not the only one pursuing this neutral atom quantum computing approach. There are some others. I'll just throw out some of the names. Atom Computing in Berkeley, California. Inflection with a Q instead of a C in Boulder, Colorado. And Pascal in Massy, France. They've all created machines already with hundreds of qubits in this new technology.
Yeah, that's definitely. I like the fact that there's a lot of other players researching that tech. To me, that gives it a little more foundation or stability into building off of it. We always hear about new tech or new ideas and things like that, but unless we continue to follow along or something really hits, it kind of dies on the vine and stuff like that. But since there's so many groups apparently working on that tech, that is exciting. I like that. I mean, that means that we could that further or speeds up the development of quantum computing as a whole. So maybe we'll see those in mass use sooner than later.
So I have a question about
Beth or Carl, do you have a story you wanted to cover?
Can I ask a question to Andy? Is there is quantum computing going to remove the need for the chips, right? Like, so the way that that AI gets trained right now or gets interacted with is based on the chip. Elon just did his thing with 200,000 H100s, those kinds of things. Does quantum computing mean that that is less necessary? Does it replace the chip design, all that kind of stuff?
I'll think of it as a different chip type.
Okay.
Yeah. So there are electronic circuits, literally transistors in a chip, and there's a lot of touch points for all the circuits that have to, be fed in and out of a chip. So, these chips that we talk about from NVIDIA, for example, are massive things. They're
Right.
large blocks that are assembling all of those computing resources there. There is a chip at the heart of this huge cooling tower in the Willow system. And then there are microwaves and or lasers that are aimed at that chip to modify the quantum states of the elements inside there, either a superconducting circuit or whatever. This is using literally an atom as the building block for the qubit and focusing lasers on that atom. You can imagine an almost invisible microscopic laser that is pointed at one of those iridium atoms. So it will be on a chip. It will just have a bunch of lasers that are connected to it rather than a bunch of electric circuits that are connected to memory from the computing transistors in the chip.
Got it. Thank you.
I have
now we need a whole show on quantum computing.
Yeah, we do. Well, I have a news, but actually I want to talk to Andy though about it.
Okay. Just a second.
But anyway, well, the news I wanted to go into was The Verge, and they had the New York Times adopts AI tools, and look who's here. This is Andy. How's it going?
Nicely done. Nicely done. I love it.
We're here at the
honest.
headquarters of 0 to 60 AI.
Yeah. So it's awesome.
I'll be honest,
awesome.
I knew he was there and I did not see that coming.
Yeah.
That was well played.
Yeah, nicely done.
And I knew better.
Yeah, well, he had to go. So
yeah, if everybody doesn't realize, we normally show up a few minutes before we go live so that we can prep and whatnot. Andy, awesome poker face, didn't lead on anything. Carl comes on, I didn't suspect a thing, and then boom, yeah, great execution. That was awesome.
That was awesome.
I love it.
All right, well, did you actually have a question for Andy, or was that just the setup?
Well, that was kind of the setup, but because I needed to let him know, I had to give him a signal, be like, "Hey, I need to ask him something." And he's like, "Okay."
Pull the ear, yeah.
Gotcha.
Awesome.
So I did have news. And by the way, Andy's awesome. We really, before our 800 show or 600 show, we all have to find a way to get together because it's just really neat. It's neat meeting Brian. It's awesome meeting Andy. I would love to meet Beth and Junmi and obviously Aaron. To our alumni Robert too. It's just awesome. The news story I want to talk to you about was the New York Times adopts AI tools in the newsroom. I just found it funny because they're suing OpenAI, but then they have this new AI tool called Echo to encourage employees to use it to suggest edits and revisions for their work, generate summaries, promotional copy for social media and SEO headlines. So I would imagine it's some sort of, one could say it's a GPT wrapper because you can technically do all that stuff right now.
Right. Well, wasn't there news a while ago about them looking into developing their own or picking up?
So this was pretty much it, and it's now they're encouraging the staff to use this, and they have set up the rules and so on. And then The Verge goes, it isn't clear how much AI edited copy the Times will allow in published articles. You just don't know, and then journalism will always be reported, written, edited by expert journalists. Who are the expert journalists?
Well, I mean, it's whoever putting out the story, I'm assuming. But what's interesting is this does align with the recent update to how the Copyright Office treats AI. So, so there's some alignment there in releasing. Oh, now we're going to say that we're using this because we can make or at least check off that box where we can make the case that the stories that we're working on is mostly with our own journalist human input and things like that. I wonder if this is all in now being released or talked about and whatnot because of things being settled with OpenAI or just larger cases like that. Just they've reached a plateau level, and now that they can make their own inputs. I'd really like to know the technical details. Did they reveal any technical details at all? Like, oh, we're using this open source model and we're using this RAG system with our own data and those kinds of things.
No,
or it was just, oh, we're just going to use, this is the new thing.
They say in this article from Semaphore that they've used GitHub's Copilot, they've used Vertex AI from Google, Notebook LM, NYT's Chat Explorer, some Amazon AI products, and OpenAI's non-ChatGPT API through the New York Times business account. So I think there's a lot of different tools they're using, and they give some suggestions in here and how the ways it can be used. But if I could, Jimmy, I want to say this is sort of a callback to a discussion. I think it was just Andy and I talking about, maybe more people were there for that, but shadow AI. So the idea that shadow AI, that if companies do not get their hands around this and make this part of their process, it's going to be used anyway, was the point of it. So all these journalists are using AI. They've been using AI for a year plus, 2 years plus. You can't convince me that there's not a journalist that's not using it in the least examples of a Grammarly type tool to just help them tighten up their writing, help me understand maybe a different angle for this paragraph. I mean, literally, why wouldn't you do that? Now, that's a far cry from a year ago and saying, well, I'm using ChatGPT to do all my research for me. We would have a year ago said, whoa, careful. But if I can pivot to and transition to another news story, and Beth, I'm going to share my screen for this one, from Perplexity, who has now made their deep research available inside. It was in the API. You heard me talk about that, I think, last week. But now they're making it available directly in ChatGPT. And the reason I want to combine these two stories together is this is a perfect example of how this could be used at the New York Times, or frankly, anybody. So, by the way, I love that they've been doing this new sort of eco-looking Perplexity logo. They've done that a few times now. I think it looks super cool. I'm sure they used AI for that, but it looks pretty cool. So basically, they're saying now, just like they had into the API, you can now use this drop down. You could do similar stuff to this in the past, but you can now use a drop down. So let me show you an example of that. So here we go. This is my Perplexity account. I literally ran this right before the show. So I just used, when I was putting in this particular prompt, I used the drop down for deep research. There's still R1 there. There's still O1 there, but now they have literally deep research. This took about 3, maybe 4 minutes to totally run through these 39 sources. And you can see everything it went through to do it. For anybody not looking at my screen, if you don't know this about me, I'm a sugar addict. I have a sugar addiction. I take that seriously. That's not like a throwaway sentence for me. So just something to know about me is as you're listening to the show. And it's something I've suffered with for several years and didn't really understand that it was an actual thing. So several years ago, I wrote a book on it. But in that process, I got myself really educated as much as possible. I read every single book by the experts about added sugar and the effects on health and how it affected me, why I was addicted, all these things. So this is the first thing I thought of this morning because I wanted to use it like true deep research. So imagine if I'm now a journalist and I want to write on sugar addiction for whatever reason. Maybe it's it's January and I'm going to be talking about healthy things or whatever. And maybe I saw something about getting below 5% of your total daily calories, which is like the upper echelon of what you should be shooting for as a healthy individual for added sugar consumption. Added sugar, by the way, meaning like in addition to, does not mean fruit. It doesn't mean whatever. It's not point of the show, but just so you understand. And so you can see what Perplexity did here. Not only did it give me very good, I read through this, it gave me very good information back that I would personally agree with, but it's also got all my cited sources. It's got cited sources in there from Gemma. It's got cited sources in there from really good research. So if going back to the New York Times, why wouldn't I instill this and make this part of the way that my journalists research and do research? Because now you have tools like this that ran in 3 minutes that would have taken me perhaps hours to put together. And I'm not suggesting any journalist should not do their due diligence and check all these cited sources, but man, is that much easier if I'm going to write an article about this than if I had started from scratch. So I think this is like, my point to saying this is, number one, deep research from Perplexity is bonkers good and everybody should use it. And they made it available to the free side as well. You just have limited use cases for it. Pro gets unlimited. I could run this 30 times today on 30 different deep research topics if I wanted to. Just imagine the power of that. So not only is this not the same story we could have reported on a year ago for New York Times, it's drastically different because of the power of AI. We're not simply saying, oh, it hallucinates. It may not be right about that. Come on, look at this. And then say, wouldn't you at the New York Times, wouldn't you want everybody working more efficiently to produce better New York Times articles by using tools like this deep research or 7 other ones that are out there right now?
But wouldn't you say that well, wouldn't you say that the way that they are using to vet the research and the sources are skills that they developed before AI was a thing?
Sure.
Like, how are you making sure that that the new reporters that are coming up are developing those skills in a world where this is quicker and easier? Like that, I think is the concern. I agree with the New York Times story, right? Like, yes, use the tools, but one of the things that I think we're seeing across the board is that using the tools is taking away learning opportunities, the typical learning opportunities for junior whatevers to become skilled senior whatevers. And it's likely not something we're going to hit very soon because the senior whatevers are going to be able to work longer and do more. But there is like I think there's a like, oh, holy crap, we should have been doing things with juniors before that we're not like increasing that skill level and closing that skill gap because we don't need to right now, but we will come to a point where we realize we have needed to and we didn't.
I don't know that I agree with that.
So
I think there's a good argument somewhere on the other side of that, Beth, that says, all things being considered, if the reader, if your typical New York Times reader was presented 20 and 10 of those were done by junior using heavier AI influence and 10 of those were done by senior leading investigative journalists at New York Times, the best of the best, using or not using AI, did the reader feel like they got a reduced quality piece? And the answer is, I have no idea. I might be totally wrong on this, but I'd be curious to whether what you're saying is actually necessary, or should we actually, yes, be teaching journalists how to do their job that they've always had to do, but also obviously promoting how to use tools like this for efficiency's sake?
I think there's the efficiency side, but like, and we were having this discussion too about something else, like in a law firm, and part of that discussion was, hey, any junior lawyer could go into these tools and write briefs, write contracts, and all that kind of stuff. But part of the argument was, if they don't learn how to do it and they fail to do it, that's how you gain the experience doing it. That's the big piece, right? So as a journalist, yeah, you can write, like, part of being a journalist, going out, getting story, talking to your sources and all that stuff, right? And then there's obviously the writing component too, and you know, for me, I love sports journalism, especially the really deep, long articles about, you know, this specific, you know, where culture and sports come together. And I don't, I like to get to that level, to some of the more senior people that have been covering certain teams for so long. You won't get that if you start out your career with these tools, and maybe it different. It's like the way that you learn is a little bit different. So maybe as part of those tools, your writing style changes a little bit. I don't think it's obviously a good idea to just have AI write your story. You just give it all your context. We write me a story. I feel like there's a certain flavor each journalist has that's developed over time. Like you can tell by the writing, you tell by the stance, maybe even their takes. So it's not pure objective. Like a lot of journalism today is, you know, a mixture of fact, like here's objectively what happened, and then their perspective on it. There's a lot of like it pretty much everywhere. So I'm curious to see how that would play out with when you have tools like this to be able to bang out articles.
Yeah, so I'll phrase it this way. Do we see a future in which AI has an opinion? Because what we're really interested in journalism, I think, is facts. Yes, we want the factual basis, but we also want the human's take on that, the well-prepared and well-informed humans' informed opinion about that. And so AI can also, I think, ultimately generate those kinds of opinions and simulate quite accurately the skills of a senior journalist.
Yeah. I mean, I agree.
Okay.
I agree
Yeah,
with what you said, and I agree with Carl said as well.
Yeah, I think the main takeaway for me is one. This is an awareness and attention, you know, point, and it's not just going to be for journalists, but it's going to be that question of junior versus senior. What are you taking away from it? And one of the key points that I forget who I was reading about, but their insight was that um, there's going to be those individuals who are part of any organization that are essentially the institutional memory. They know where all the skeletons are buried, or how something grew from point A to, you know, point Z or whatnot. And having that kind of institutional memory is going to be wildly important for the health of any organization. I imagine in the case for journalism and journalists, it's identifying the key skills, techniques, or approaches that you can then apply your experience to. Because AI is going to fill the niche for information, right? Like deep research is a huge jump for the average person in terms of being able to dive or delve into whatever topic you know, that they're trying to investigate. And it's an incredible tool. Does it save a lot of time for a journalist in this use case? Absolutely. But how it's applied and what's drawn from those is, I think, what's more important. It's just like in the academic circles when they said Wikipedia is a great place to start, but not rely on, right? Search those sources that are listed there. Use that as a basis for your additional questions. Investigate further. That's and I think that's where deep research is right now for most people. It's just, it provides you a vast amount of information and really deep information on any topic.
And it goes back to augmentation, right, Jimmy? Like it's AI plus human expertise is really where you find the best today. I don't know about tomorrow. I don't know what AI will be able to do necessarily. But today, we know human expertise plus AI is a very potent combination. And that, I think, is what we're seeing here. Take the best journalists in the world and give them this perplexity. They should be better, not worse. They should be better, and they should be able to produce the same high level quality in less time. That's massive. when you think about that. Just think about that from a business standpoint, from New York Times or any company for that matter, how impressive and how big of a deal that would be. So good for them. I'm glad that they're solving for themselves, hopefully, the shadow AI issue of not just allowing or not just saying to all journalists, I mean, we think you're using AI, but we don't want to talk about it. They're putting something out there, right or wrong. Maybe they'll stumble and fall, and they will in fact learn from their failures for this. But I love seeing this, and it actually makes me want to read more New York Times articles because of it, frankly. I like that there's AI in there. To me, it's akin to going to a doctor. When I was, I'll tell you this real quick. When I was like 9, I had an ulcer, but they didn't know I had an ulcer because at that time, everybody thought it was like anxiety ridden. And there's this thing called a duodenal ulcer. And it just was very unusual for a kid to have it. Right. So we're talking about 1988, 9, 8. I would have been 10 in 88. Right. So like maybe 87. So they're going around or whatever. I get into a doctor's office, and I was one of those kids that got offended if the doctor didn't talk directly to me. Go figure. And so the doctor turns to my mom, and he's having a conversation or whatever. And my mom tries to soothe me by saying he hasn't had to do surgery in blah, 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 or he hasn't had to look at a book or whatever. And my answer was the same thing I'd say here is, do I want a surgeon or a doctor that hasn't had to put his nose in a book for 3? I'm not impressed by that. What do you mean he hasn't looked in a book? My mom's point was he's so good he doesn't have to. My point as a 9-year-old was, shouldn't I be concerned about a doctor who's too good to put his nose in a book? So, like, shouldn't he be doing research? And so that's what I would say about this. Like, don't we want that? Don't we want people to be going back and uncovering and not just resting on their expertise or laurels and using these new tools wherever they can augment and help their process? I do. So I actually think New York Times articles will be better for this, not worse, but it's something we'll have to see over time. So very, very cool story though.
Okay. Well, I always have to have a AI in science story. Beth, you got something you want to talk about first?
I do, because I was just finding the reference for Gareth in the chat. Google's blog, published on February 13th, announced that Gemini is now able to reference past chat. So it's able to remember or access, right, the previous conversations that you've had with Gemini Advanced. And so you no longer really need to do that summary thing. That's sort of what they're talking about, where you want to make sure that you remember what that chat was called, or you put a little emoji on it so that you know that those chats are all about a certain topic. You can ask Gemini, whether you're asking a question about something you've already discussed or asking Gemini to summarize a previous conversation. Gemini uses information now from relevant chats to craft a response. So it's not just their training, it's also the context of previous conversations with you. And I popped the link in the chat.
Is this similar to how the memory or instructions is used with ChatGPT, or is this a completely different method?
This, I think, is a completely different method, but it does not go into whether it's updating something for you. It could be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Gemini has a million context window, right? So I mean, they have room to spare. If they're like pulling in notes to self about your previous chat, they have not gone into like oh no, you're in control over what information is stored. So I guess it is very much like that. It seemed to be more you can go to my activity and Gemini can indicate when it's using your past chats and sources and related content. It seems to me that this is slightly more robust than what OpenAI is doing, both for context window and because of the way that it is doing it. The way that it's sort of doing it specifically within previous like subject-based conversations, whereas OpenAI is like, okay, so you've now told me you're a co-host on a daily AI show, you're really into animation and musical improv, so I'm getting musical improv answers. that reference the Daily AI show and animation, right? Like it's not discerning in that way. And my sense is that the Gemini Advanced is more discerning in that context.
You know, Beth, I think this is a great future conversation show too about what do we ultimately want from memory when in reference to AI, because selective memory is actually what I would suggest we need. And I probably think Gemini is probably going to do that. I'm going to look more into this too, because it wouldn't surprise me that Gemini is ahead of the game on this. Quite frankly, I'll say for ChatGPT or OpenAI, I'll say their memory sucks. It's awful. Their custom instructions worse than they were a year ago. This is just my opinion on that. But I use these things all the time. The problem is it doesn't have contextual or selective memory. Just we've seen people in the news that have like one of these infinite memories, and they can tell you the date and the time of anything that happened. And if you talk to somebody like that, not that I know somebody, but I've seen them, interviewed and stuff, and they will tell you it's a blessing and a curse, because they can't necessarily filter out what's necessarily important for the conversation I'm having right now. They get everything, and it will tell you it's maddening because it'll happen nonstop, right? So I think we should have a conversation about this, a show about memory, and not just like where we are with memory and maybe more about what Gemini is doing, but ultimately, what do we, the users, want from memory? Because we don't want all-knowing memory. It's not, I don't think it's the solution people think it's going to have, unless the AI is eventually smart enough to pick and choose the right memory bits for the context you're in right now. Because knowing everything is not actually a solution for me. That's like saying you have a rag with 1 million documents in it. Good luck pulling out the needle in the haystack of those 1 million documents. We know that would tax the ability of a RAG system, most likely, I'm assuming, unless there's a good one out there. So I think there's a bigger conversation here about memory. It's not what we think we want. That's what my guess is on that.
Right. And that sounds like a mixture of experts thing. I need an expert that is focused on what is a good search through my memory and what are the most relevant things to pull out in this context, right? And then they all come back to the AI agent, the super AI agent that makes it all into a delightful soup. But everybody else is coming, all the other agents are coming with their with what they've found in answer to whatever it is. Yeah, we're in a messy place for sure.
For sure. Yeah. More memory isn't necessarily better,
I also just want to say, because I know that sometimes people watch our news shows and don't watch the others, that we covered the Grok drop on yesterday's show and 4.0 Google OpenAI's 4.0 updated better whatever. We covered that on Monday's show. So if you're looking for those two news stories, the reason we're not talking about them is because we talked a lot about them.
Yeah, good call out on that. By the way, I want to say too, before we go too far, there are a lot of people said happy birthday to me. I just want to say thank you. I can't respond to everybody in there. You can see my my wife decorated my office for me, and very, very sweet. And so I just left them up in the background. But thank you for the happy birthday wishes. I appreciate it. My birthday was yesterday. So thanks everybody. Turned a sprite young age of 47. And so yeah. Thank you for that. Just want to make sure I got that out before I forgot to say it. Also, Andy, inquiring minds want to know here. This is sort of a news story. Carl's not here. Carl's will be back, I think, in a couple of minutes. But like maybe while Carl's not here, you can give us the skinny. You're at Carl's house. What is the recycling situation at Carl's house? Is it like, I feel like now that we have an insider knowledge in this, is it out of control? Does he really need an AI robot to help? Or
he does, and I'll explain why. It's really a geospatial problem. His house is sitting up on a little hill, and there's a very, very steep, long series of steps down to the street. And so getting anything from up here down there is steep. It's cold outside. It's slippery. He needs a robot stat.
Well, hey, the good news with that, Andy, is that Mark Zuckerberg announced that they're going to be getting into the humanoid robot. And specifically, they said humanoid robots to help with household tasks, maybe like recycling, maybe to go down several steps. So they're in talks right now with Unitree Robotics as well as Figure AI. we've seen what Figure and Unitree have put out, especially Figure has put out about it. So right now, Meta is not saying that they want to develop their own humanoid robots in-house, but they are definitely getting into that space. So, I think you actually said this, Andy, it's about time for another robot show. And I think you're right, because OpenAI has talked about it. Now Meta's talking about it. It'd be interesting to see what some of the Chinese companies have put out there, as well as Figure. There's been a lot of developments, even since CES, I would say last month, in the robotic side of things. But Meta's throwing their hat in the ring and saying, we want to be part of this too. And we'll have to see how the general users respond to having a quote unquote Facebook robot walking around your house, and whether people feel comfortable about that or don't feel comfortable about that. So it'll be very interesting to hear about that for sure.
And Carl, just to catch up, we just talked about your recycling situation and your need for robots. So Andy represented your interests very well.
Sounds good.
I wanted to hear Andy's, I needed that outside perspective, Carl, now that somebody has visited your house about the situation with recycling, to catch our all audience. And by the way, as Beth said, if you only catch us on the news shows, this has been an ongoing good discussion, multi-month discussion about Carl's recycling needs and where AI robots specifically can come and help him in his life. So if you're wondering why that came out of nowhere, that's where that show comes from. All of our folks in the chat are cracking up and laughing that it came back up. So Cisco and everybody else in there. So
I have a couple of quickies here toward the end. First of all, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Let's shift over to the aspect of AI being applied to military capabilities in the battlefield and on the oceans. A company called Saronic got a $600 million Series C at a valuation of $4 billion. And what Saronic does is they specialize in autonomous surface vessels. Now you've seen, the Houthi rebels even have surface drones that are basically bomb boats that are unmanned, that go and find their way to a big tanker and try to explode into the side of it. Well, that's a very simple, concept. Probably not AI driven yet, but possibly their navigation might be AI assisted. Well, this company, Saronic, has built a fleet of 3 different types of autonomous surface vessels. And the operational capabilities they're aiming at are, movement and maneuver. So that these things can, do tricky things in combat operations. They can collect intelligence. They can do surveillance, they can do reconnaissance, and they have weapon systems on board, so they can fire. And they have sustainable sort of, perpetual agentic capabilities to work autonomously, even when they're separated from their command and control centers. The other thing I wanted to quickly point out is that this is on the subject of the OpenAI gyrations with Elon Musk around their attempts to convert from a nonprofit format to a for-profit and nonprofit combination. And there's news this week that OpenAI is creating what amounts to like a poison pill to prevent that kind of takeover by someone like Elon Musk of the nonprofit arm, which has some rights over the profit making part of the system. And specifically, they're giving special voting rights to their nonprofit board that would allow the nonprofit board to overrule the major investors' interests in the OpenAI system. So it's a measure that's obviously responsive to Elon Musk's sort of Black Knight attempt. And instead of having a black knight and a white knight, they're trying to create a mechanism inside the company that will allow them to deflect such an attack.
You know what I found interesting about that, Andy, is that Twitter used the poison pill to initially block Elon Musk's Twitter and then reverse course 10 days later and then agreed to sell for whatever it was, 44 billion at the time. But when I read that article, I thought, oh, isn't that ironic that Twitter had used the poison pill that you just described to block Elon Musk? and now OpenAI is discussing using potentially something similar to block Elon Musk coming at OpenAI. So that's an interesting one for sure.
Can I end the show with one thing that I just saw today? I think it just came out, kind of, and I actually want to share this. Um, so, does everybody remember, the 5 levels, right? So you got chatbots, and then reasoners, and then agents, and then you have innovators, right? So Google came out with this. I think it's just today. It is today. So they came out with a new scientific breakthrough called AI co-scientist, and I thought that was really neat because, okay, so I had perplexity just quickly because I just saw it like right now. So it's built on Gemini 2.0, helps scientists accelerate the research discovery process. So some key features: uses specialized agents, generation, reflection, ranking, evolution, proximity, and meta review that work together to generate and refine research hypothesis. Scientists can interact with the system using simple natural languages. The system can access multiple information sources, web searches, research papers, and specialized databases. Um, Researchers at Imperial College London have successfully used the system to recreate in a fraction of the time what would have taken them years of laboratory research. So it's in their trusted tester program, and I think it's supposed to, I don't think anybody can just get in there. It has to be research organizations to have early access. So I thought that was really neat because I think this is sort of the first signs it's moving. There's agents, but they're kind of moving into agents and then innovators. I thought that was a kind of cool thing, to kind of exciting if you're in the research field to have an AI co-scientist with you. And they have some benchmarks here of what a co-scientist can do. I just saw it right now, so I haven't even seen what this does.
It kind of reminds me of like a coder. Yeah, that's hard to say, but you know what I mean? Coder, a coding helper, right? We think of coding as being one of those really disrupted industries where people are writing code, and even if they're very talented in that area and their job secure, they're probably also using coding helpers because AI has gotten so good there. So it's kind of cool to see this, Carl, that we're seeing more and more of these sort of the stories you share a lot of times, Jimmy, like these scientific discoveries, or what we're seeing happen with proteins right now. We talked about that, I think, last week. And if you're a scientist and now you can get more help, I briefly saw it on the screen there as you were scrolling, like it says testing, refining. It's right there. Don't move. It says iterative, generative, evaluate, and refine hypothesis, resulting in self-improving cycle of something. It's like the last paragraph on there. But anyway, that's what I was thinking. Like, oh, it'll help with hypothesis and iterating through them faster if you're a scientist. This is super, super cool. So I'll definitely be looking into this. And people are asking for the link.
I think this is a great story to end on. So number one, thank you everybody for joining us today. The news shows are always jam-packed with a ton of news all over the place, and so much so that I know we did not even get through half of the ones that we've got lined up. But thank you for joining us. We appreciate everyone who hops in the chat and continues the discussion there. We still have a couple more shows this week. We got Thursday and Friday coming up. And remember, every Sunday we have the newsletter. So if you haven't already signed up for that, please go to thedailyAIshow.com and go ahead and sign up for that newsletter. Tons of great information. It's a fantastic read. All right, I think that'll be it. And hopefully we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you so much. Aloha.